Hi, and welcome to Transformation Now. We are dedicated to hope, help, humor, and heart, helping you and educating and supporting you in all areas of your life, finances, relationship, to help bring more of you, the best of you, out of you. And so I have a couple questions for you today. Have you experienced a sharp turn in your original mission in life? Probably yes. How can you turn an unexpected hardship into a new road to victory?
Today we have an exciting program with Camille Matoyer, and we're going to talk about the winding road in your mission in life.
All right. Hi, I'm Rita Rocker Crafts, and I'm the founder, host, and kind of honcho for SoaringHigher.rocks. And this is Transformation Now. And so we really want to help you in all areas of your life, your career, your health, everything that happens, and this is going to be really an awesome program for you today. We also like to help you with your life, your career transforming programs, things that you can start using immediately and that will last a lifetime.
Hi, my name is Carmelita De La Guardia, and I'm a co-host, and also I am an international singer and pianist. And as far as I do a lot with international women's issues. So English and Spanish translator here in Omaha and in Fremont.
Great. And we are so excited today to introduce to you Camille Matoyer Moten. I'm going to read this because it's such an awesome little biography here. She is Quality Control and Community Engagement with Youth Care and Beyond Incorporated. And she's one amazing singer, songwriter, and author, and she'll tell you about that in a little bit, who lifts up, inspires, and helps people to discover their new victorious road through the hardships that we all face. You know, Camille shares a beautiful story, and she shared it with me a couple weeks ago, and it's quite amazing, regarding overcoming major life-shattering health issues, triumphing to fulfill the calling that she has on her life. She has a remarkable story about going through trials and triumphs and helping then to guide other people down the paths, trusting God for the direction that they're supposed to go, and trusting Him to open the doors to their new futures. Camille, we're so excited to have you on our program today.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
Thank
Thanks
you.
for inviting me. It's awesome. Thanks.
Camille, could you please share with us on your growing years how it molded you into what you are today? Could you share that with us?
Sure. I was born here in Omaha, and to some amazing parents. My mom and dad were very active in civil rights and in making sure that people had the things that they should have. And so we grew up in a home where we learned about how to fight for the things that you are entitled to, how to make yourself known, and to just make sure that you get the things in life that you deserve. And so as a black family, that was kind of in the 60s, so it was during that sort of civil rights upheaval and everything. And I always tell everybody that I went to jail when I was 8 years old because I was arrested when I was 8 years old. My parents we would protest. We would go out and we would demonstrate. Because at the time there was an issue with open housing. Black people, there was that redlining thing, so black people were confined to a certain part of the city. And so they were protesting for open housing, and so they took me one time to one of their protests, and I actually got arrested with my dad. Went to jail, which was kind of an experience for an 8-year-old. But I was with my dad, so it was fine. But yeah, so I grew up in that home, and one of the things that happened, my parents were very determined to make sure that we all received a good education. And one of the things that they found out, though, was that in our North Omaha schools, the textbooks and the resources that we had were actually rejected old textbooks and resources from the West Omaha schools. And so in order to combat that, they said, well, we can't change that in the lifespan of our children right now because that's going to be a long process. Yeah. So they determined that they were going to move west, and so that we could have access to those schools there. And so we were, in order to do that though, because there was that whole redlining thing, they had to kind of sneak in. So they had a black realtor who was friends with a white realtor, and they bought a home in West Omaha. And so we just kind of showed up. before anybody could, make any protest or statements about it. And so that was really interesting because we were the only black people in the area. Of course, that was West Omaha then, which is almost Midtown now because the city has grown so much, right?
Yeah.
But we had situations where people came to the house with guns and they threw eggs on the house and put nails in the driveway and all of that kind of stuff. But I had the best parents, and we just we talked about it and we learned through that experience. And they encouraged us to not be daunted by that and just to continue pursuing what is right. So yeah, I had great parents. It was an awesome.
Wonderful.
Yeah, I feel very blessed that they were with us, that I was, born into that family.
Yeah. It sounds like, your parents taught you how to be, you're smart, you're strong, you're equal.
Yeah.
And, a lot of people, even no matter where they're coming from, their background, are like, well, I'm not as good as,
Right.
I'm not as smart as. Do you have something that you would tell someone that maybe you met and they're feeling that I'm not smart, I'm not strong, I'm unequal? What would you tell them?
Well, I feel like everybody has gifts, and some people feel inferior because maybe they don't have the same gift that somebody else has. So I always encourage people to realize and understand that you have a gift. God has blessed you with gifts, and you just may need to figure what those gifts are. It's like I think I was telling you guys earlier, I am horrible in math. But God has gifted me in writing and understanding language, and so I embrace that. I'm not good in math. That's okay.
Me either.
Right. I mean, so a big deal. There's calculators, and you make mistakes sometimes, like tithing your entire check to church, and when you really didn't want to do that. But but it's all good because it's all for God. Right. So that's what I always encourage people, because people say that all the time. Because as a singer, they'll say, "Oh, I wish I could sing like you," and I'll say, "Well, I wish I could do math." We all have our gifts, so let's just express ourselves in the blessings that God has given us.
Amen. And
Wonderful.
so, one thing I used to say is it seems like we compare what we consider our liabilities
Yeah.
with other people's assets,
Right, yeah.
instead of seeing that we are all gifted. And it's so easy to compare ourselves with someone else on a
Right.
particular issue and go, well, gee, I can't do that. Well, yeah, you can do other things.
You can do other things, right?
So
Exactly.
please, folks, remember that.
Right, that's right. Exactly.
We all have something special.
Right, yes, we do.
So let's do this. What kind of lessons, like for instance, when you went through all those hardships, like drug and alcohol, how did that teach you, or what can you say today to get those others to hear you?
I went through a difficult time because as I was like 16, 17, my mother, I was really close with, developed brain cancer and died. She died the week I graduated from high school. Yeah. And so it was really hard for me to lose her. And then right at that time I was graduating from high school, I went off to college. And so it was difficult because I was away from home and I missed her. And in some ways I would kind of pretend like she was back here in Omaha, and that kind of helped me to get through. But over a period of time, it really started wearing on me, and it was the 70s. So there were drugs aplenty, and so I sort of got into kind of, the whole marijuana thing, and then it kind of went on from there. And when I look back on it, I just, thank God that I actually graduated from college, because I'm not even sure how that happened, but I did. But as time went on, I came to a point, even before I met my husband, who was a major part of my, turnaround, that I felt like I just didn't want to disappoint my family and the way I had been raised, So I think that's one of the things that kept me from going over the edge before I found God, or he wasn't lost, before he came into my life. But during that time, I met my husband, who wasn't my husband at the time. He was my boyfriend, and we were living kind of that wild, life of whatever. And
Hippie stage?
Say what?
The hippie stage.
The hippie stage,
Oh,
right,
that one.
exactly.
Yeah,
Oh my gosh,
smoking,
we were like, we thought we were all that. And I remember one particular New Year's Eve, we were driving home from a party, and we were like high and everything, and I said to him, well, what's your New Year's resolution? And he said, to get closer to God, which was like, where that came out of left field, because we never had talked about that at all, and certainly weren't living a godly lifestyle. And Of course, my resolution was to lose weight, which it still is every New Year's, even all these years later. But anyway, but time went on, and eventually, a few weeks later, or a month or so later, a man came to his office. He was selling insurance, and a man came in to talk to him, to talk to his boss. But he started talking to my husband, Michael, about Jesus. And it was, and he was so hungry and thirsty for that, and not really realizing it at the time. Anyway, so the man just sort of witnessed to him, and he kind of came back and kept talking to him about God and about what his life could be, in a life with Christ. And so, and at that same time, I'm not traveling on that journey. I'm still doing what I'm doing. I'm going to school, but I'm still, whatever. And then I came home one day, and because we were living together, and he was in our apartment with the man, and he was on his knees in the living room floor with his hands up, and he was speaking in tongues. And I had no understanding of that at all. The only thing I knew about speaking in tongues was the Exorcist movie or something, And so I thought, well, this is weird. And so I just, went upstairs. But his life completely changed. He no longer smoked. He didn't drink. He had no desire for any of the drugs and things that we were doing. And so I kind of was, between a rock and a hard place, because I wasn't there. I was, still trying to live this life. And my goal at the time was to finish school and go to New York, because I wanted to perform. I wanted to be a musical theater person and, perform on Broadway. And so none of this was fitting into that thing. Anyway, so he kept, kind of talking to me, and I wasn't really, buying it. And then a few weeks, over time, one night he came and he said he was going to church, and he said, "Do you want to go with me?" And I said, "No, I don't want to go with you." And so he went and he started crying, which was, my husband's a big old guy, to see him cry was like, that's really, wow. And so he went to church, and I didn't go, but then I started feeling bad because, and so I did go to church, and nothing really happened that night, because I just felt like I didn't really understand everything that was going on. But shortly after that, I started kind of listening to him, and things kind of made sense. And a lot of people come to Christ through their heart, but mine was almost like a logical thing, like, this just makes sense, There's got to be something better than this, So I really started listening. And then not too long after that, we were praying, and I also received the Holy Ghost and spoke in tongues. I've been doing that ever since, and my life changed. I no longer had that goal of really going to Broadway. Really, all I wanted to do was live a life that represented Christ. And so we got married. So 43 years later, here we are. He's a pastor now. And that's just kind of, everything changed, and it put everything in perspective for me. When we were moving back to Omaha, we lived in New Orleans at the time. I don't know if I mentioned that. This is my school. I was down in New Orleans going to school, and that's where he's from. And we had the opportunity to come to Omaha to be family teachers at Boys Town, because our mission was to kind of serve and to make lives better for people. And so we came, and my dad worked at Boys Town. He'd been working there my whole life. And so we, had this, interview, and things went really well. And then while I was here, I found out that my family also had another business. We had a barbecue business. And my father had fired a woman from that business a few months prior to that, and she had been sort of harassing him and almost stalking him because she was angry about the whole situation. So he was telling me about it, and he said, he'd gone to see some people down at this was before stalking laws were in place, and he'd gone to see some people to see, what can I do about this? Because she'd done things like thrown a brick through the picture window, and she sent a hearse to the house, to pick him up, just weird, crazy things, And so he said, I don't know really what to do about it. I'm just hoping that, whatever. Anyway, so we had come for the interview at Boys Town, and then we went back down to New Orleans. We got hired, and then on Monday, that woman walked into the barbecue and shot him and killed him, right as we were coming, right before we came back. So that was really, I was so anxious to get back to Omaha to be with my family, with my dad again and everything, and then it was just taken away. So that was like crazy. But over time, you know, it's like if you can just stay with God, He will reveal things to you and things will start to make sense. And I realize now that my father had such an influence over me. He really, really did, that I don't think that had we moved back here that I really would have stayed with my Christian faith, because his influence was so strong. And he wasn't a believer. He was, you know, he was a great guy, but he wasn't anybody that really professed Christ, or, you know, and I tried to talk to him. He really was, he kind of mocked it even a little bit, because he was a very intelligent man. And, you know, that oftentimes gets in the way of people. He was very smart. He was, you know, I mean, he was a great person, but so over time I came to realize, you know, I think that if he had still been here, it may have deterred the journey that God had us on. So, and you know, and you have to, and so those are hard things to accept, because you think, you know, whatever, but God has to do what God has to do to make sure that things remain in place. So,
well, one of the things I remember that you really hit me with when we met and we were talking was about God removes things sometimes, and at the time we are very sad, we're upset. I remember Madeline, when she was on kind of the same thing, you know, sometimes things are removed from us and it's like, why? And yet in God's ultimate plan, they had to be removed for us to be able to move up, go to the next step, do that on. And when you think of something like losing your dad through something so horrible, it's like, what in the world? Why would this? But you saw in that even then that God was able to work His plan in your life when you're you know.
Exactly. You know, and that's the hard thing. You think, gosh, that's so awful. But, you know, God has to do what God has to do for His, we are here to serve Him. And that's the ultimate thing. And regardless of our feelings, regardless of, you know, what things look like, we are here to serve Him. So it took me a while to get to that point, but I did, you know, and I was, you know, fine with that. I mean, I hated losing my dad, and, you know, and maybe that's not exactly what it was, but that's, you know, kind of been my resolution, and I'm, you know, I can't change it. I can't change what happened to him. So
that's right. We have to establish a new normal. In whatever way that might be.
Exactly. So by the time I was 24, I'd lost both my parents, and they were great people, you know, so it was just kind of.
So could you tell us about your mom? How did you lose your mom?
Oh, my mom, she was wonderful. So my mom actually was a singer, and but she never, a frustrated singer, right? So I grew up listening to her sing and all of her jazz albums and all that kind of stuff. And actually, when she was a teenager, or right around 18 or 19, Duke Ellington came to town, and she auditioned for him, and he offered her the opportunity to tour with him. But she was, you know, my dad was, you know, in the picture, so she opted to, you know, of course, marry him. And we used to laugh and tell her, Mom, if you'd have married Duke Ellington, we'd be famous. And she said, if you'd have gone off with Duke Ellington, we'd be famous. And she'd say, if I'd have gone off with Duke Ellington, you wouldn't exist. So just get over that, right? Anyway, she was a great person, and she always encouraged us to. She was that person that said, you can be anything you want to be. Don't let anybody block you from being and doing what you want to do and be, you know. So she was great. But when I was about 16, she had kind of had some issues where, you know, she started having problems being in crowds and things like that. And this was back in the early 70s, so they just didn't have a whole lot of information about cancer at that time. But she had a brain tumor that was growing, and eventually she kind of lost the ability to speak, and, you know, all of those things. And so
she was so young. How old was
she was 40. She was 41 when they diagnosed her with the cancer, and then at 40 she died at 42. And it was a long labored death, you know, because they kept putting her in the hospital, and they'd do more surgery, and then she'd come back home, and, you know, it was really difficult. But my dad was so great. He would, you know, do her nails and put her makeup on and do all that kind of stuff for her. Yeah, they were a great couple.
What a good,
that's beautiful.
Beautiful example.
Yeah.
You know, one thing that I remember when we talked a couple weeks ago too, it was something about New Year's resolutions and transferring to God. And that's another thing. You know, just because we've given our lives over to God, sometimes it's hard to transfer. I remember a guy at the church I had been going to, and he had done the drugs just like you and me, and you know, all that kind of stuff. And so as he would read his Bible, he was still smoking pot, you
Yeah.
know, and he'd have little seeds burn the Bible pages and stuff.
Yeah,
and,
right.
You know, it's kind of like laugh a little bit.
You're right.
But at the same time, it was a process for him to
Yeah.
do that. So
Yeah.
what are your thoughts on, you know, being able to just totally transfer
Yeah.
air God?
I know. Right. Well, I think it all has to do with being filled with His Spirit, which the evidence of that is when you speak in tongues. The Bible always shows that whenever anybody was filled with the Holy Spirit, God took over their tongue, because the Bible says the tongue is the most unruly thing. So people that I know that went through that experience have been able to just do it like that. I was, you know, I did the drugs, I cussed like a sailor and all that kind of stuff, and then I didn't. The same thing with my husband, then he didn't. But a lot of it has to do with your faith and your belief that God has you. And I think that people will tend to go back to those crutches because they haven't been they fully don't understand what God has for them and what He can do for them. It's all about faith, but then it's about trust too, right? I mean, we have faith that something will happen, but then we trust that God's got the whole thing. So maybe things don't look like we think they should look like, but God is the one that knows what it looks like. So we have faith for one thing, but we trust that God knows what's happening or what should happen in our lives. So I guess I would say to people that are having trouble making that transition that they need to get filled with His Spirit, and then that will give them the power to live that life. It makes a difference. Yeah.
In 2013, you had cancer.
Right.
Could
Yes.
you please tell us about that?
Yeah. So that was crazy. I was just, you know, going on, living normal life, whatever, and I went to the doctor and for my regular exam, and she said, well, I think you need to, you know, go see a specialist because, or no, she said, you need to have a mammogram. Or I had a mammogram, I think, and so then they said, yeah, there's something on it, so you need, you know, have a biopsy. I'm like, okay, that's crazy. But I'd had some like cysts before, so I really didn't think it was a big deal. I thought, I'm just cysty, you know, that dense breast tissue, a
Yes.
lot, you know, whatever.
Yep.
So, but then I went and they did the biopsy and they called and they said, well, it's cancerous. And my first, I mean, I even said it out loud. I said, okay, God, how are we going to do this one? You know, because I never, ever, ever felt that this was unto death. I knew that Jesus is my healer. That's why He went to the cross. That's why He had all those stripes for our healing.
Amen.
So I never, ever really doubted that I would be fine. But that was the faith. But then I trusted that if this was my time to go, then that's God's plan, and there's a reason. But anyway, so as I went through the cancer, I thought, well, you know, this is a great opportunity for me to sort of blog about it, because Facebook was the big thing then, right? So I thought, well, I can just talk about it so that people understand what it is when you go through cancer. And also it's an opportunity for me to just throw my faith out there so people can understand that this is where you go in times of trouble, right?
Yes.
And so I did every day when I would write about it. When I went to the doctor, I would, just, do the whole experience. And there were a lot of funny things. There were a lot of crazy things. You know, I had no hair. And when I was losing,
you look beautiful.
Well, thank you. I actually kind of miss my bald head sometimes because I would get places
got a perfect
way
head.
more on time. Right? And you never know what your head's going to look like till you lose your hair.
Yeah, that's true.
Right,
That's
right.
true.
I remember when so after one chemo treatment, is when the hair starts.
Wow.
Right, and I was driving down the street and I have a convertible and I'm just driving down the street and everything's hunky-dory. I look in the rearview mirror and I see hair going.
Oh my God.
Right, and yes, and I thought, oh my gosh. All I could think about was there were probably cars behind me with hair hitting their windshield and there's wrecks all over.
Oh my gosh.
I thought, well, this is not good. I don't have the right earrings on for this. So anyway, so, eventually it all came out and I was, I just wore it like it was. Because I just wanted it. I wasn't ashamed of it. It was just something that was happening. I was going through it. I would go places and I would kind of get those side eyes or whatever, but it was all fine. It was like the white elephant in the room everywhere I went. There was this big bald head.
I'm sure.
But it was, there were a lot of crazy things. I did have one wig that I would wear sometimes if it was, because you get sun sensitive when you're going through chemo. And so cold would affect it, so I had a wig I would keep in my purse in case I needed it. And I wore it one day, and I was, but you can't keep it on because there's no nothing to attach it to.
Oh.
So I put like double-sided tape. That was the thing they said, to put double-sided tape. So I went through the whole day with double-sided tape. I got home and that tape was like right here. And nobody ever said a word. It had like worked its way down to like, I thought that was it for, for Whitney. That was what I named that wig.
We just have about 1 minute to wrap up. So just quickly, if you could tell the viewers, even on God's timing, He told you not to have surgery once. We've got about 1 minute, and then to have surgery.
Right, yeah.
So sometimes God's timing, well, a lot of times isn't ours.
Right, exactly. So I'd gone to a doctor, and I felt like God was telling me not to have the surgery. And so eventually I canceled it. And then another friend came to me and said, well, I think I know who you need to go to. And God sent me to the correct surgeon. It was a woman who believed and who had no criticism about how I was going through my, my journey. I hate to say that because but that was the important thing. God was sending me to the right person, so it worked out great. So I wrote a book called Nothing Is Everything, and I don't call myself a cancer survivor. I call myself a cancer triumphant, if that even makes sense. So,
That's
but yeah,
great.
yeah.
And we're triumphant in God and His plans and His purpose for our lives. And so again, Camille, we want to thank you so much for being here. Again, you can check out Camille on Facebook and Google her and get her book. It's a powerful, very strong book. So join us please next time when we have Sherry Dickmeyer here. She is with Fit Girl. She is really impacting the lives of so many, mostly underprivileged girls and their moms. So remember, God loves you, we love you, and we'll see you next time. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.